Welcome back to the Developer Relations Activity Patterns podcast, also known as the Drapcast.
Ooh, we're going public with it.
We're going public with it. Yeah.
All right.
We're the Drap Pack.
We are the Drap Pack, and we are talking on our Drapcast about Drap. And it's interesting, gents, because I actually had a conversation with somebody who was talking about partnerships, about, the engagements, the relationships that you build between companies. And so I figured we would talk about that tonight, if you guys are up for it.
Yeah.
Let's do
it. Obviously, as you're an employee of a company, you represent the company, you go out, you meet other companies, and occasionally you run across one. It's like, oh yeah, we should do something together. We should like figure out ways for us to like commingle our efforts and whatnot. And then you kind of look at each other like, okay, so what now? What do you do? Somebody's interested, right? They obviously still have to go and run it past their leadership, but what do you do on your side? And Scott, I think you've done more of these than I have. So I'm kind of curious, starting with you, what do you do?
I got into really like up to my eyeballs in partnerships when I was a developer advocate at PagerDuty. And so if you think about PagerDuty is a software.
No, wait. That's the company that pages me in the middle of the night, right? We hate you. Isn't that your tagline?
Exactly. That was the most common thing people would tell me when they come up to me at conferences. They come up to me and say, I hate you. And then I just smile and hand them a sticker that said, don't hate the page or hate the game.
Nice.
Yeah, it was good. But no, at PagerDuty, if you think about it, it's a platform that notifies you that something is happening, whether it's wrong, whether it's good. But it lets you know, it gives you a notification and does a really good job of scheduling that and scheduling rotations and escalations and things. But all of those notifications are signals coming in from other platforms. So our partnership library, our partnership group was huge, right? Because everything that PagerDuty did was based on partners. And so those partners would send us a signal, and then we would send that signal out to their users. And so it was fascinating, right? Because there was so many of these partners where it was a pretty cut and dry sort of relationship where it's, we have a signal, we want to send it out to our users. So we'll partnership with you, and we'll obviously, we'll connect with our APIs, and then make sure that, we have the right, connections, the right code, right? That we're connecting with their APIs, and we're sending the right parameters. We're sending all the right optimized calls and things like that. But then you have other partners where we're a little more integrated into the livelihood of the teams. And so
yeah, that's the one that I'm kind of curious about, because the first one you talk about is more of like a technical engineering, making sure the APIs line up kind of engagement. I'm thinking about more the ecosystem, right? Like, do we how we share, go on each other's podcasts, or do we try to do some long time ago when I was at Smartsheet, before I'd built out the team, it was, okay, we want to, there's a hackathon going on down in San Francisco, and, let's figure out. And a friend of mine was working at Microsoft at the time and was headed to the hackathon. I said, hey, yeah, you could like totally jump in with us. And it was Microsoft and DocuSign and Smartsheet. And I think there was one other company who I think has since gone bankrupt. I can't remember. Right. But, that just fell into my lap, which was easy. But how do you, how do we negotiate this, or how do we, set up, so that's win-win for both sides, ideally.
Right. The relationship is interesting depending on the size of each partner and we're talking about the reputation, not necessarily like number of employees, right? But like in our case with PagerDuty was an established player in the incident management space. And so people would want to partner with us because we had the big name. And so we definitely wanted to partner with those people. However, we were more interested in looking up the chain, right? Like up the food chain. And so we wanted to partner with the companies that were bigger than us to try to get in on their reputations as well. So you have to find that relationship where either, if you can find that golden spot where both of you are benefiting from the relationship, that's where both sides will be motivated to actually do something good and to actually be engaged, and they'll respond, and you'll be able to do a lot of good partnership content. A really great relationship we had there was with HashiCorp. When I was working at PagerDuty, we started maintaining the Terraform provider, and the Terraform provider is we discovered at the time, at least as a company, we discovered that basically our entire user base was managing their infrastructure with Terraform, and most people wanted to use PagerDuty with Terraform. In fact, I heard at some point there were customers that said, if you don't have a Terraform provider, then this is a non-starter. And so having that relationship, not only technically, right? Like we had the provider, we started maintaining that provider that was created by the community. And then we also started having collaborations with folks at HashiCorp. So I would do joint talks with folks at HashiCorp. I would jump into their, they had Hashi Talks, right? Which is like an online conference that they would do. And we would do talks there. And then they would come on to our shows and talk to us about their things and share about the latest things, what's happening with Terraform and things like that. And they'd come into our Terraform meetups that we'd have. We call them Terraform time, where we'd have a round table, right? And so we both saw that there was value in having a joint relationship, but also joint collaboration on various pieces of content.
Yeah.
And then just finding other ways to get involved with each other's, with each other's, what's the word? Campaigns, right? With each other's messaging.
Yeah.
And so if you can find that good relationship where both of you can see value in each other, that's gold. A lot of times though, you're going to have situations where you're the big fish, and maybe you do some goodwill by partnering with those younger companies, those smaller fish. But see, you have to remember, when you were the small fish, there were big fish that took chances on you, right? So you should definitely take chances on some smaller fish. But again, at PagerDuty, we had to ruthlessly prioritize, because so many people wanted to have that simple relationship where the technical wasn't super hard, but they still wanted to have us say, oh yeah, we totally recommend using, platform X.
Yeah.
And so, but then
exactly.
is it too much work on our end with not enough benefit? And then when it's that situation, we're not as motivated.
Yeah.
So
Well, it was like a JetBrains for plugins, which is kind of the same thing. We wanted, or JetBrains wanted, other companies to have plugins for their IDE ecosystems. And so we would give them certain developers or people within the company that were proficient in developing plugins would kind of team up with those companies and help them build it and kind of mentor them, and then they would maintain it and then come back and get help when needed. So that was kind of that type of partnership. But a lot of times we would talk to people, and we're not high up on the chain, the food chain. So, but we would talk to people at our level, and we'd come up with ideas, and then each one of us on each side would have to start cultivating the idea and advocating it up the chain to see how it went. Because more than likely, to have a true partnership, you're going to have senior leadership right off on it. So more than likely, you can't create a partnership by yourself. You really need the authority and there's also legal. I mean, I think every pattern that we talk about, we get marketing and legal and other teams, but that's why at DevRel you have to know so many people around the company that you work with, because it's important to know who can help you kind of with those ideas and with those potential big wins that you come up with. And for partnerships, you come up with probably someone, your peer at another company, who you both have great ideas or have a great idea that then you have to build and work your way up through the ranks.
Well, I think that highlights the fact that, partnerships is definitely it's not a binary thing, right? It's not like, you're a partner, no, you're not, right? There's all these different levels of engagement with a partner. One is literally the developer advocates saying, hey, you come on my podcast, I'll go on yours. Then there's, cross-posting of content, and, you get up to like formal endorsement, right? Hey, we're HashiCorp, and on our website, we have your logo because you're an official partner. And that, as you get higher up the scale, obviously is where more and more of the legal team, the marketing team, and, at a certain level, the CEO's got to get involved, right? The CEO has to sign off on this. And if the partnership is deep enough, two CEOs may come out on stage during a keynote and talk about a thing, right? Or talk about the recently announced partnership that they have. And we see this a lot of the big company conferences, right? Apple's doing a thing, and here comes Mark Zuckerberg walking on stage and indicating that Apple and Facebook are now, besties for life, which lasted, I think, like 1 or 2 releases. And that's part of it too, is the realization that partnerships really do have to work for both sides. Yeah. Otherwise, they're not going to last for very long. And so, you really do want to create that win-win scenario, whether you're the big fish or the little fish, because sometimes a well-positioned little fish can be enough to make things really worth it for the big fish. But otherwise, if you're the big fish, like you said, you really have to triage some of your time and energy as to where are we going to get the biggest bang out of our buck, while fully recognizing that the bigger fish than you are doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
And then from there, the partnerships that I have seen be successful are ones that are, maintained over time, right? You can do something once and it becomes a flash in the pan, and it's not really a partnership. And that requires dedication of effort, right? You really have to have, and really almost requires somebody on both sides to be consistently thinking about, okay, what do we do next? What do we do now? Do we want to, we've got a conference coming up, I'm thinking like, the PagerDuty HashiCorp partnership that you brought up, Scott. KubeCon is coming up. Are you going to be there? Yes, we're going to be there. Okay, cool. Do you want to do a talk together? Is there something we could do together? Do we want to co-sponsor the evening activity? Do we want to, is this really a transactional partnership where I do something because it benefits me and I don't care if it benefits you, and we just evaluate each potential transaction as it comes? Or is this more of a friendship?
Yeah.
Right. Where we really are trying to look out for each other, and maybe even to the point of making sales referrals. Hey, I happen to know somebody over at HashiCorp, and I'm sure we can set something up. That there's lots of different nuances to the partnership thing that I think are hard to categorize collectively, like, say, I don't know, in a pattern.
Yeah. And we've been talking about partnerships that DevRel drives, but more than likely, the majority of partnerships are not going to be coming from DevRel. They're going to be coming from CEOs, C-level relationships. They're going to be coming from sales. Like sales is doing a campaign with another company for this one segment, and they're pulling DevRel in. So you also have to be open to kind of take on responsibility and take on some of this for partnerships that you had no that you weren't involved in, but you have to execute the partnership. So I've been in those too, where it just came down, hey, we're doing this big campaign, marketing and sales, have all this content. You have to drive it and get it out to our customers and our audience, and go do it. And you may think it's a steaming pile of dung, but you still have to do it. So
I wondered what word was going to come out of your mouth next, especially on a G-rated podcast.
Yeah,
So.
well,
Wait, are we G-rated or PG?
I would never have to cause myself more work in the production of these episodes. So yeah, I can watch my tongue. So, but you have to be open to these partnerships that maybe you don't agree with, or that you don't see any benefits from, but that someone higher up has some idea what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And one of the things, even just like in this exchange that we just had, right, about, the pile of dung, different companies are going to have different standards of conduct, right? And that's going to be something that's also going to need to be sorted out when you start talking about partnership, right? Certain companies may have particular phrases, particular approaches. One company may be very, fast and loose and pithy. They try to incorporate humor into their stuff. They will occasionally, I think of the time, for example, I was, an instructor at Developmentor for a number of years, which, this was the company where Don Box was, the co-founder. And Don is the guy, quite famously, who decided to give a talk on SOAP, the Simple Object Access Protocol, from a bathtub on stage in Barcelona. And if you look at the photos, I mean, he looks like he's like in a bathtub, like sans clothing. All clothing.
Awkward.
Well, and this is where, there's no way in heaven that Microsoft would have signed off on this in any way, shape, or form, right? Because that's just not something they could get away with today. Right. Regardless of whether Don was down for it, which he really was. I mean, he was all jazzed to do this. It's very stimulating to be the guy known as the guy who gave a talk from a bathtub. But I mean, that's part of what, particularly when you've got bigger fish and smaller fish. Smaller fish are often willing to take more risks like that and willing to push the edges of things like that, particularly if it helps them, today go viral. And so, on the one hand, yeah, this can be useful. But like, even for example, when I gave a talk at the 2008 PDC, when Microsoft was introducing F#, the programming language, to the rest of the world, I was on stage with Luke Hoban, who was the program manager for F#. And somebody asked the question, why should I use this as opposed to, existing C#? And I said, well, basically, you want to use C# if you want to write tomorrow's legacy code today. For anything that's not, use F#. Luke told me later, he's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that and not me, because I would have been fired if I had.
Right. But you were the partner. So you could.
I was the partner, right? Yeah. I was the independent on stage who could say that, because nobody's going to fire me. The worst they could do is maybe delete the video from the library. And, but by the time it was done in person, I mean, can't call that one
you've
back.
done worse on stage.
Oh, we're not going to get into that.
We're not going to.
But I mean, that's kind of the part of the point here is, if you go into a partnership with another company, obviously if it's just a cross-branding thing, logos on the website, okay, fine, whatever, but understand that your reputation goes with theirs and vice versa in proportionate degree to the depth of the partnership.
Yeah.
Right. And so if they do something great, you're going to get the benefit of that. If they do something terrible, right? If all of a sudden they turn around and are found to be guilty of fraud and, stealing from the company pension and that sort of thing, I mean, that in some diluted ways is also going to come back to reflect on you fairly quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes, like you said, Woody, if this is a CEO mandated partnership and the news breaks while you're at a conference and somebody comes up to you and says, so, hey, you're partners with that company that was found to be killing kittens on a regular basis to make its product. How do you feel about that? You can't just say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to
say
be
no
in a
comment. Talk.
I suppose you could, but
But that's sometimes even worse. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these are the kinds of things that you take on when you do a partnership, which is why the legal team's default answer is always no. Right. I mean, that's they have thought about all of those permutations and their response is no. Now convince us yes. Right. So I mean, it's interesting to take on a partnership, and 9 times out of 10, the partnership, it goes. Each company gets a little something out of it, and then it falls by the wayside. It's not a long legal binding, thing, but it's still something to think about when you run across that other developer advocate and like, yeah, we totally do stuff together. Yeah, let's do stuff together. And then, okay, what does that mean? What does that imply?
Yeah.
How deep is this going to go? If it's just literally here's my company backpack, you carry that around the conference and I'll do the same for you. And we both win. Yeah, that's trivial, but it's also the impact is trivial.
Well, and I think this is one of the few patterns that I think that there are good metrics around it. Because I think you can get sales. I mean, in the end, DevRel drives sales. I mean, that's really what DevRel
at least successful DevRel does.
Yes. And usually you can derive sales from partnerships. You can figure out because you're trying to get into their audience and they're trying to get into your audience, and so because of that, anyone that you sell to that can be identified as your partners, customers or clients, that's a dollar sign that you can kind of hook your wagon to and say, we help drive those sales numbers. Where like a blog post, who knows how a blog post influenced sales.
Yeah definitely.
So I was looking at the metrics and I'm like, oh, sales numbers. Those are easy to identify. So
for external DevRel, certainly, right? Now, when you start thinking about DevRel internally to the company, right? Especially if you're a large company, partnerships here can mean partnerships with other teams, or even partnership with a Pluralsight or a LinkedIn or somebody to bring training to the rest of the company, right? It doesn't always have to turn around to sales dollars, but certainly considering that most of the DevRel folks in the world are focusing on external DevRel, and most of them are working at places where they sell to people, and most of the partnerships are going to be driven by what you've just said. Certainly, any partnership that gets created is, because again, the CEO-led partnership, you may not actually see those sales numbers unless you specifically go hunting for them to try to figure out, hey, our partnership with HashiCorp ended up generating all of these leads, and DevRel is the one that kind of owns that partnership. So, those should be reflected in our performance reviews, annual reviews, that sort of thing. Sometimes those numbers will be harder to get hold of than they should be.
Yes.
But.
Yep. Oh.
Well, I will conclude my thoughts with one of the most successful partnerships that I've had in recent years, which is the three of you. Yeah, I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed our partnership work on the book and the podcast and whatnot. So thank you, gents, for joining me on this journey.
No problem. It's been a good partnership. So I agree. So
Absolutely.
And be enthusiastic with your partners. So that's a suggestion. So yep.
Scott, final thoughts?
So the thought I've been having as we've been discussing this is, what's the difference between a quick transaction and a actual relationship as a partnership? And I think for me, if you're going to collaborate, right, you do like a quick thing where you just kind of both do a thing together and then that's it. That's you just kind of move on. That's a collaboration. So that's not really a partnership. A partnership is repeated collaboration. Your habit of collaborating with each other, and you're looking out for one another. As far as like, obviously you still have to look out for, your organization, your business,
right?
But in the partnership, you're looking for the win-win situations.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, with that, I think we're going to call a halt to this particular episode. Again, if you're listening to this and you're enjoying what you're listening to, like and subscribe, do the usual mashing of the buttons down there across the bottom. If you didn't enjoy this particular podcast, we are Scott Hanselman, and you should direct all criticism towards. For now, though, we'll sign off until we catch you next time on the Drapcast, the Developer Relations Activity Patterns podcast. Peace out, y'all.
Drap out.
Bye-bye.